Namaskar and welcome to Sunset Television. I am Vishal Dahiya and you're watching our show In Focus, where we talk about several issues of national and international importance. Today we're going to talk about Baba Sahab Bhimrao Ambedkar, remembering his legacy as well. Now India is celebrating 132nd birth anniversary of Bharat Ratna, Dr. Bhimrao Ambedkar. Popularly known as the father of Indian Constitution, Dr. Bhimrao Ramji Ambedkar was a multifaceted personality whose contributions had an impact well beyond the walls of the Constituent Assembly on every aspect of India's social fabric. Now, he was also the first Law and Justice Minister of independent India. Born in 1891 in Maharashtra, Ambedkar rose from a humble background to become a leading voice of the marginalized people during the freedom struggle and is credited with introducing several social reforms. He wrote extensively on history, economics, political science and sociology. He was also a strong advocate of women's rights, labor rights and gender equality. So in this edition of In Focus, we will recall Dr. B.R. Ambedkar's contribution in different sections in this society. And for more on this, we're joined by a distinguished panel of experts. Let me first introduce them to you, beginning with Professor Sushma Yadav, member of UGC, is here with us. Welcome to our show, Professor Yadav. We're also joined by Mr. P.K. Malhotra, former Law Secretary with the Government of India. Mr. Parijat Kaul, senior journalist, is also with us. And Mr. Deshratan Nigam, advocate in the Supreme Court, is also joining us. Welcome to you as well, Advocate Nigam. Let me begin first by focusing on, Dr. Bhimrao Ambedkar's contribution towards the Constitution. He is known as the father of Indian Constitution as well. So I'll start with you, Mr. Malhotra. Let's go back to the Constituent Assembly. Let's try and create that picture to make our viewers understand as to why, one, we consider him as father of our Constitution and what is the major contribution.
Dahiyaji, when the nation is celebrating 132nd birth anniversary of Dr. Bhimrao Ambedkar, I salute the man. I salute the man for the simple reason that a person during his early age who has faced discrimination based on caste has reached the highest pinnacle of the society, obtained highest degree from the most important universities on the world, and is now recognized as a jurist, as an economist, as a politician and as a social reformer. And all because of the hard work done by him, having faced the discrimination at that stage. And probably I feel that the kind of discrimination which he faced probably gave him more strength and strengthened his view that in society like India, probably discrimination on caste basis is one thing which needed to be totally removed. Okay. And when he got an opportunity, having come to the system, either in the Governor General Council or working with the government prior to that, or at the time of drafting of the 1935 Act, or at the time of drafting of the Constitution when he was chosen as the chairman of the drafting committee of the Constitution, he ensured that the Constitution which we are making contain provision which eliminates discrimination and improves the right of equality enshrined in Article 14 of the Constitution. Okay. Let me make a reference to Article 15 of the Constitution, which is more important than 14 because that carries out the mandate given under Article 14 when it says that no person should be discriminated only on the basis of sex, caste, race, religion, any of these. But at the same time, a special provision was made that dispensation can be made or exception can be made in favor of women and child. And later on, it was added that of socially and economically backward classes, as well as for scheduled castes and scheduled tribe, who are facing discrimination from the whole society, special provision can be made. I think that vision can be thought of only by a person like Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, who himself has faced this kind of discrimination in his early age. Okay. So with that kind of provision having been made in the Constitution because he has seen this discrimination, he was strong votary of equal right for women. Also, he was a strong votary for equal right for the children and also for the working class, more particularly equality at the workplace where all workers, women as well as men. And therefore, the special labor legislation which came in the early time, even after the 1935 Act or during the British period in Governor General Council, or even after independence when he was the law minister, all those provided for maternity benefits to the women, equality at workplace, equal pay for equal work, I think all these provisions were made because of his vision, which he gave in our constitution.
Okay.
And whenever there was an opposition to all this, and he has stood the platform, and on the working of the constitution, he said that on the floor of the house itself, when the provisional parliament was passing this constitution was passed on 29th of November, 26th of November 1949, and on 25th, when he was replying to the questions which were raised on the provisional part, he said, we have given the best constitution, but its implementation depends on the people who will be implementing it. Howsoever good a document may be, but if its implementation is bad, the document will become bad.
Okay.
So I think with that kind of vision with which he gave this constitution and worked as the first law minister of the country, the stage was set where he was talking of not only political equality, but social and economic equality, to which we can discuss.
We'll come to those aspects as well. In fact, there are immense contributions of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar on those aspects as well. But Mr. Kaul, how would you analyze and assess Dr. Bhimrao Ambedkar's contribution when we're talking about as an architect of the Constitution?
I'll take his argument forward. What he said was, it is to bring the entire society at par with each other, to remove caste system. Now, there are two things. When you're removing caste system, one thing is that you can just bar caste from society altogether, which is not a possible thing. Other is to bring all castes together at the same level in terms of political representation, in terms of jobs, in terms of education. So that is for what Dr. Ambedkar gives us a very, very strong tool for that purpose. But when he said also, depends on people who implement it, how you implement it. The problem has been with implementation. What has been happening is that, the government after government have been coming and they have been doling out reservation. Instead, it would have been better that if the proper survey should have been done, and reservation should have been rolled out to everybody who required it, who needed it, and not just on the basis of caste. Okay, so that would have allowed the society to grow together to a certain level. What is now happening is that we give it to 10 people, then we give it to 20 people, somebody gets left behind. In this, some get marginalized more further. So the problem was that he gave a very good, a very powerful thought, a very powerful and a detailed document to us. But we seem to have not really used it so well as we should have it used.
Okay. So the template was good, but the implementation part is where, we will have to be a bit more judicious and careful out there. Let me bring in Advocate Deshatan Nigam also here. Advocate Nigam, not only the constitutional aspect of it, but, since you are a lawyer, we would also like to understand what is it that remains there for, lawyers in this generation or in this time frame to learn from Dr. B.R. Ambedkar's career as a lawyer?
Well, Vishal, in fact, he was the first lawyer from the backward community. And his training and in law, both as a student and as a practitioner of law, he was at par excellence. Nobody can compare himself. And that is the role model that we as lawyers today look up to him. And apart from being a lawyer, when you look at his personality, it's a combination of being economist, politician, social reformer, friend, philosopher, and a guide. That these are the values that, he enshrined in the Constitution. He was the chairman of the drafting committee, and he took along with himself Dr. Rajendra Prasad very well and other members of the committee and drafted an excellent constitution, which has stood the test of time. In fact, today what we see the constitution, that today the government, as people talked about, it has to be in the right hands to be correctly and rightfully implemented. So when we look at the constitution, and he was the first satyagrahi who did satyagrah for drinking water. Can you imagine that? And then when you see a scheme like Har Ghar Mein Jal in the present government, then you realize his immense contribution that you see out there. And at the same time, he's one of the only person, in fact, the only person, first and only person in the world to receive a valuable doctorate degree named Doctor of All Sciences from London School of Economics. Nobody in the world has been able to get it. So his contribution is immense. The RBI was established on account of his principles he propounded. Demonetization took place in 2017. And in his book, in his Rupee and its Solutions and Problems of Rupees, he clearly stated the problems that the rupee was facing, and demonetization is a solution. So look at his today's, relevance that the government had to even resort to all those things. And at the same time, when people, talk of Ambedkar, then we also have to look that he was undermined also. Right till his death, he was undermined. His principles, although were talked about, were not actually implemented by actually people who were supposed to implement.
Okay.
In fact, he was the Congress party made him, lose the elections. And the great person, the first law minister of this country, and in fact, Gandhi said you can't find a person more intellectual than him. He had differences with Gandhi, no doubt about it. He favored industrialization, urbanization, whereas Gandhi was was relying on the village panchayat system being republics. So there are issues, no doubt about it. But he stands out.
Yes, we will come to the political aspect of his life as well, and those are very interesting aspects also. But let's dwell a bit deeper into Dr. Ambedkar's, another part of Dr. Ambedkar's personality and his achievements, and that is, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar as a rebel against social inequities, as a social reformer. He's considered to be, as both Mr. Malhotra was referring to it, Mr. Kaul was referring to it as well, in terms of work done vis-a-vis social reforms. And there are various aspects. It's not just limited to, upliftment of marginalized section in the society, but other specific sections as well. Professor Yadav? Yeah.
Thank you. Before I start that, I would also like to remind our audience here, he was the man who got first honoris causa from California University, which I'm sure it was first for his work done on the creation of this constitution or drafting of this constitution. And it was his social aspects which he emphasized upon. That's why, the commentators like Grenville Austin call it a social document. First and foremost, a social document. So social reform, social change, and we can say very peaceful social revolution, which occurred through the constitution and through his works and through his attempts. I would say he realized that the society in India is based on inequality, and he understood the inequality as his experiences also and as an intellectual. And when he went outside, that is London School of Economics, California University, then he saw a different world. And he started thinking why India shouldn't be that. And when he came back to Baroda, when the secretary called him back because his scholarship had expired, and when he came here and worked for some time, he realized the society hasn't changed, because the peon wouldn't work for him. They won't bring water for him. They would not even like to serve him despite being the secretary of the state. And then he realized that the society needs to be changed. There were some painful moments. He sat under that tree in Baroda and he thought there was no home for him because nobody would offer him a home. So from there to this place, the present age, I think there's a huge change. That's his efforts. He created peaceful agitations also. He led passive resistance movements also, whether it was for water or it was for entry into temple. These were social aspects, entry into temple. But he told his people to be peaceful because he believed in parliamentary means of agitation especially. And the parliamentary means remained very, very dear to him, though it was at times very costly. I would like to also share with you here that he wanted to change the society through education, through understanding, through a change of mind, and his entry into the Constituent Assembly gave him that opportunity.
Okay.
And that opportunity, I think he utilized as best as possible, because when he ended his draft presentation, he said, when I entered this assembly, I didn't know what I was supposed to do. In fact, how onerous the task was. I thought I'll be only working for the marginalized or for the people of my community or those who are being discriminated. But it was an onerous task, and I'm happy that we have given a constitution which is one of the world's best, and we have created a society which would really go to be a democratic, rational, moral society.
Okay.
That was his dream.
That was the dream.
Yeah.
But taking from your comments, one aspect, Mr. Malhotra, I'd like to bring you in here. In terms of a clear approach by Dr. Ambedkar on the focus on education for the marginalized section of the society, that seemed to have had a very, very immense impact in the long run if you look at it.
Vishal, I think you are making a very valid point, and as Professor Yadav has also said, I think he believed that unless people are educated and they are brought at par, probably the kind of social disparity which in the society people are facing, that cannot be removed. So his stress has always been on education as well as for the upliftment of the women. And more importantly, he believed that instead of political democracy, India needs social democracy. And for promoting that social democracy, when the constitution was made, specific provision was made. Now, I tell you, I mean, all of us are aware that we have fundamental rights in Part 3 of the Constitution and directive principle of state policy in Part 4 of the Constitution. And these directive principles are nothing but social and economic rights of the individual. Fundamental rights, which are political rights, were made enforceable under the Constitution because the maker of the Constitution at that time knew these are political rights and therefore they need to be protected. But for social and economic rights, probably it will take a long time because you have to educate people, you have to bring them at par, and then the government will be in a position, and then when that opportunity comes, government will be in a position to implement these social and economic rights also. Okay. Also, the process has begun even prior to independence also. As I mentioned, when he was in the Governor General's Council, he had made certain labor legislations for the benefit of the labor class, where equality was provided and their rights, rights of the labor were protected. So going that way, I think he was more interested in enforcement of social and economic rights of the individual, which can bring the society at par, than the political rights. Okay. More particularly with regard to the functioning of the state, I think very important point was, because he was in America, he has seen the American society, he has seen the European society. Therefore, he knew that India as a nation, when we are talking, if United Nations cannot be a nation, and it is a United States of America, it is not United Nation. Therefore, in India also, it is this through states which we are administering. So he structured it in a way that it is a quasi-federal structure where states are also given power for implementation of it because of the diversity of the society and the kind of discrimination the society is facing. Therefore, he worked on a model which is a quasi-federal, and probably that quasi-federal, which is more center-oriented, worked in a better way for our society than the kind of federal structure which United States is having. Okay. So I think these are very important aspects. Moreover, he wanted nation as a one. Take, for example, I think Desh Ratan was also mentioning about it, that uniformity or the equal rights for everyone. Take, for example, Article 370. When the Constitution was made, he was the one who was opposing Article 370 because he was saying within the nation, you can't create a separate state where other individual of the state belonging to the India, who are the Indian citizens, they cannot go and participate in the development of that state. And I think that now has been corrected by the government by making necessary amendment in Article 370, and probably Jammu and Kashmir has also been brought at par.
Okay. Okay. Now that you brought that aspect, I'd like to bring in Mr. Kaul here because he's worked a lot on J&K. In terms of those issues, vis-a-vis the Constitution, when it was framed specifically when we are talking about Article 370, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar stand as well. And going back to the point which you made, Mr. Kaul, earlier, that he gave us a good template. It was up to us to implement it properly.
See, he brought 370, but in case of Jammu and Kashmir, that is the most glaring discrimination that has happened in the country in terms of giving equal rights to people, all people. And I'll take you to one thing. Like in 1957, there was a massive municipal crisis in J&K, in Srinagar and Jammu especially. All Safai Karmcharis refused to work. So there was a pile of trash everywhere in both the cities. So what the government decided at that time was to bring in some people from Punjab, Safai Karmcharis from Punjab, Valmiki from Punjab, and settle them there and give them job. That's what they told them. Give them job and give them a ration card and also, and they will do the Safai. And there was one single stroke. What they did was they brought in people from outside and discriminated against their own people. Number one. Number two, when they brought them in, they had to make a certain change to permanent resident certificate, because without that you could not enter Kashmir at all, and forget, you could not work there at all, you could not live there at all. So they made the change, they created the passage for them, but inserted a clause when they made the amendment for them, for that particular group only, that they made the change that they are allowed to come, live here, work here, only on the job of Safai Karmchari. Now those 250 odd families came, They settled. For them, it was a good thing. For them, they got land to make a house, they got a government job, they got ration cards. In the beginning, it was fine. But after that, the 3 generations have been doing nothing but Safai Karmachari. They cannot do any job anywhere else also. They have been denied the scheduled caste certificate, so they cannot get the benefits of UPSC also. They cannot work outside, they cannot work there. They are not allowed to study beyond graduation. They did not have any rights to go to any professional college. People have done, even now the 3rd generation have done MBA, they have done MA, but they cannot come back and get a job. Now they can. In 2019, so when I say implementation, and so others were also saying implementation, the point is that how it was implemented, how the policy of Dr. Ambedkar should have been implemented. This was happening in 1947 right there in front of everybody. And the federal structure, as he was referring to, has also created these problems because states have been given a lot of power.
Okay.
In a lot of places, you will see reservation up to 60% also. But still, there's a problem. There are still people demanding reservation. So there's something wrong with the implementation part. There should be a better implementation.
Okay.
So what is happening now in Kashmir, you'll see that after 2019, now there's a new reservation policy. There's one group, they included Pahadi ethnic group. Now this is a Pahadi area. In this Pahadi ethnic group, they have Muslims also, they have Hindus also, they have Sikhs also. And there are the Christians, Pahadi Christians, they are also included. So that is the kind of discrimination that probably Dr. Ambedkar wanted to remove. That is being, this is a very good trial thing in what is happening in J&K right now. So there are in Jammu, there are new groups being included in which you have Christians also. So in that group, it is totally indiscriminate towards your religion, towards your caste. It is going by your requirement, your need of who should get the reservation.
Okay.
So that probably is a much better way to implement it.
Okay. We'll head into the break, but before that, Advocate Nigam, on the education part, we would also like to understand your views. The focus on ensuring that the best way for the marginalized communities to come out of that vicious circle is to educate themselves. That was the clear message.
Yes, Vishalji, in fact, that is a reflection of his life. Any child who is given the right kind of an environment can excel. And this is exactly what happened with Ambedkarji. And that is what he, in fact, through his entire process, the establishment of UGC was on account of his idea. And therefore, the universal education that he promoted and advocated about is to be seen everywhere today. And any child, whether he's a Brahmin, Yadav, or Kshatriya, or Dalit, if he's given the right kind of environment, irrespective of his economic and financial standing, a person can excel. And that is what I think the governments have tried, successive governments have tried to do, more so now in the present times. And there are a few more things, which the salaried in the private sector must also remember and thank him. He reduced the working hours from 12 to 8 hours. Please understand that. He introduced concepts like revision of pay, leave benefit, and dearness allowance, which are still followed today. So these are, far-reaching consequences in the changes that he brought, and this affects the teaching community as well. So when you look at his education, his own educational background, he was a master of 64 subjects in 9 languages. What else one can, expect from a person? And all his knowledge was reflected in the constitution. Okay. The uniform civil code that he favored is people are demanding today. The division of Madhya Pradesh and Bihar he advocated in 1950s, which was subsequently done. So imagine his revolutionary thought, and he never minced his words. He on 25th November 1949 he clearly called out the communists and the socialists for opposing the constitution, because the constitution chose for parliamentary democracy because they wanted the dictatorship of the proletariat. So he never minced his words. He was very clear in his thought. He never, thought that somebody will get appeased and other will get angry. He took a principled stand always. Indeed. In the field of education, we see the reforms that the new education policy has brought in, where focus is on skill development, making it very flexible and introducing a skill at the level of a kid, children. These are the thoughts which can be actually traced from the principles laid down by the Ambedkarji. And therefore, today, we should feel thankful. And in fact, present government, let me tell you, has converted 5 places connected to Ambedkarji into a Smriti Sthal, and also the Samvidhan Divas that the present government started celebrating was also remembering the constitution and his contribution and his legacy
Okay,
as well.
okay. Indeed, those are valuable inputs there by Dr. Ambedkar when we're talking about the field of education also. We'll take a very short break here, but when we come back on the other side, we'll also talk about Dr. Ambedkar's contribution to the economic aspect and also his journey as a politician and other social reforms as well. Stay tuned.
What are the norms and rules governing the security of diplomatic premises? And how do we ensure that the sanctity of these premises is not violated?
This is how we have to behave in while dealing with nation states, while sending ambassadors, while they open the embassies to make sure we provide the protection that is required.
We take overall security situation in the country, whether there is an insurgency going on in the country. Also, we have to take into consideration whether there are armed rebellion groups operating in the country. Third factor is where does that country stand in the index of criminality.
भारत G20 समूह देशों की अध्यक्षता कर रहा है। वैश्विक रूप से भारत पर इसका कैसा असर होगा, ये समझना भी जरूरी है।
G20 को सरकार के द्वारा और हम सभी के द्वारा एक त्योहार के रूप में मनाया जा रहा है।
मुझे लगता है कि G20 की प्रेसिडेंसी मिलने के बाद भारत को एक बहुत बड़ा मौका मिला है अपनी संस्कृति को वैश्विक स्तर पर रखने का, दिखाने का।
One thing that G20 presidency has done is दुनिया के टॉप 20 देशों में भारत पहुंच गया है, ये सबसे बड़ी उपलब्धि है।
भारत जो मदर ऑफ डेमोक्रेसी है, जो एक लोकतंत्र की गंगोत्री जिसे हम कह सकते हैं, ये जो भारत है, ये इसे जब आगे बढ़ा के लेके जाएगा तो सब पूरा विश्व सुनेगा।
Welcome back. So today in Focus, we are talking about the contributions of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, remembering his legacy and what is there for us to learn from him after all these years as well. And, before we went into the break, we were talking about Dr. Ambedkar's, contribution to the field of education, his focus on, people educating themselves as a way out of the social misery there. Professor Yadav, before we move on to the other aspects, I'd like to take your view as well on the educationist part and why that focus that much.
Thank you, Vishal. First of all, let me compliment you and Sansad TV because this is a different kind of debate, and this is the right way to be thinking about Dr. Ambedkar or discussing his contributions. I also wish to greet the nation on 132nd birth anniversary of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. A man, who's not forgotten. Nobody can really miss him. And it is because of his emphasis on education and his emphasis on India as a nation and India as an empowered nation, as we all are looking forward to it now. His emphasis was on education, and he even headed the South Borough Committee, where he talked about education. We are still, I think, miles away from his conception of higher education, where he thought a student must be able to get connected with his teacher 24 hours, in higher education especially. Because in higher education, a student thinks and his mind may be agitated and he can contact his teacher. If that's possible, the ratio should be from of 1 to 6. I mean, 6 students per teacher in higher education, which is still far away, but we've reached, I think, a very, very comfortable stage. And the reservation has surely brought in the marginalized sections of society. You can look at them, you can see them anywhere now. They are into engineering, they are into medical, they are into management, they are into higher education, they are into research, they are into innovation, everywhere. It's because of that. But I also want to remember here what Dr. Ambedkar wanted. Dr. Ambedkar wanted right to education to be a fundamental right at the time of independence. And the state couldn't do it. He was told that the state doesn't have resources, that's why it couldn't do it. But all of us can imagine the change that society must have had the right to education become a fundamental right at that time, because that is the foundation from where the education starts. And that itself makes a stronger foundation for higher education.
Okay.
I'm very sure with the kind of fellowships that we are now offering, overseas fellowships for higher education, we're giving them opportunity. Of course, there are reservations, and both fellowships, free education, free ships, and encouragement, which is called positive discrimination, which is being given in schools and which is being given in higher education.
Okay.
But taking a cue from Mr. Kaul, the implementation becomes most important. I'm really shocked because that state has really fallen on bad governance, I would say, for all these years, because we had studied the governance there. It is unimaginable how would you bring people like that and then put them again into a compartment, because it was the compartments which Dr. Ambedkar really opposed. The compartmentalization of Indian society.
Wanted those shackles to be broken,
and education was the most important means.
Key to achieving that goal there.
Yes.
Mr. Malhotra, in your earlier responses, you mentioned about Dr. Ambedkar's journey in legislative assemblies, legislative councils and parliament as well, constituent assembly as well. If we can sum up, because he was also the first law minister of the country. So his contributions from that aspect and what is there for the posterity to, learn and imbibe from what he said, the things he worked upon or the standards which he set?
See, as has been said by the other panelists also, he was a visionary. There cannot be there cannot be a question mark on that. And his vision was not looking into today's perspective. He was looking at the future, what is going to happen, how the nation is going to be built, what kind of shape the nation will be taking. He had that kind of vision. Now, one example which I can give is that he had the ability of carrying all members of the Constituent Assembly with him. In spite of the fact that on many issues there was a dissent, and in spite of that dissent, there was a unanimity when ultimately it came to finally passing the bill in the provisional parliament. And he has said that the dissent was necessary because it gave him a vision to see what is the other side of the story. And considering that other side of the story, he can answer the questions and he can make the provision of law. And this is what he did. Now, take for an example, the universal franchise which we gave, universal adult franchise. Every person who has completed the age of earlier 21 years than 18 years has got a right to vote. Whether he is a millionaire, whether he is the Prime Minister of the country, whether he is President of the country or a man on the ground, every person's vote has got on it is only a single vote. It carries the same value. So that kind of vision which he gave to the country, I think that is really marvelous. And then because he was an economist, he conceived the idea of the Finance Commission also, which is working so well as to how the states' resources will be distributed among the states and how the centrally sponsored schemes will be functioning. This vision is coming from the Finance Commission, which takes into consideration the requirement of each state. Then this RBI, the Reserve Bank of India, which controls the whole monetary policy of the government of India. This again was conceptualized by him.
The economist face of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar.
Yes, that is the economist face of the Dr. Ambedkar. And the Finance Commission as well as the Reserve Bank of India, the way they are taking our economy forward, and in spite of the fact that there is the recession throughout the world, we have been able to carry out our economy to a better platform even during the worst period, that is the COVID period also. Credit goes to the basic principles which were laid down under these laws and the basic principles which were enshrined in the Constitution.
Okay.
And with regard to the significance of the working of the parliamentary democracy, he himself has said that dissent in parliamentary democracy is a must. Because without dissent, probably you cannot achieve the best. Therefore, you will find that each and every clause and article of the Constitution was debated threadbare, because that gave you pros and cons. And as and when even today, when constitutional validity of any of the provision of the Constitution is challenged before the court looks into the parliamentary debate, a constitutional assembly debate, and come to the conclusion what all went through when this law was made, what was the requirement, what was the opposition, all those things are considered, and the court gives its judgment on the validity of a particular provision of the Constitution. I think that kind of debate need to be carried out even today also, because we find in some cases, for certain reasons, those debates are not carried out. But I think we should take lesson from the debates of the Constitutional Assembly and should carry out the parliamentary procedures the same way as it was conceived by Dr. Ambedkar.
Okay. Mr. Kaul, Dr. Ambedkar is a politician, his journey, his contributions there, because he was chosen as the first law minister by the first prime minister of the country, but later on, seemed to have had differences and with the ruling party, and as Advocate Nigam was pointing out. So how would we, or rather look at this journey of Dr. Ambedkar as a politician, perhaps things which he could have fulfilled more?
There are times when we refer to him as a rebel. I don't know why we do that. Gautam Buddha was a reformist, he was not a rebel. Mahavir Jain was a reformist, he was not a rebel. Guru Nanak was a reformist, not a rebel. He's carrying the same torch. So why do we refer to our icons as anything called rebel? He's a reformist, and he has actually reformed. He reformed the country, he reformed the society, he gave a constitution, and whatever he proposed was not negative. He only added. In terms of economy, he wanted PSUs to run the key businesses. Why? Because that was one way of giving work to marginalized people. We did that, and PSU has done a very good work in the country. They are the basis of our economic strength, even today. So first we should look at him as a reformist. Then we should have looked at him as what all he reformed. And he was not a politician. He did not do politics as we call quote-unquote politics. He represented his people. And he did what he did for people, what a politician should do. Now, we look at politics in terms of party politics, who's going to be in power, who's going to be out of power. That was not his goal. I don't think he wished to be the Prime Minister of India, or he even wished to be the Law Minister of India. He wanted to go to Parliament to work for people, and that's what he did. And I think he is remembered for his work as a true politician, and that's why I think his journey was very successful. And now you tell me in terms of party politics, well, he was not bothered about that. He was bothered more important things for the society. And he achieved all of them.
Okay.
Even today we're discussing his model. We not change his model. We're just trying to find a way to how to best implement the model, because we have not done the work he wanted us to do.
Okay.
So we should look at that way only, not term him as a general political lingo.
Okay. So in a larger concept, we look at it. Yes, Mr.
The difference which you are talking about, maybe with regard to the perception of a particular issue among the intellectuals. You may perceive a particular situation in a different way, I may perceive it in a different way, but both of us are working in a national interest. If you are working in a national interest, I think this is the beauty of the democracy, that with different perception also, if you are working in the national interest and ultimately a decision is taken and everybody is implementing it, I think we should look at that differentiation among the intellectuals in that perspective.
Okay. One more aspect, and I'd like to again start with you, Mr. Malhotra, which is hotly debated in public domain nowadays, is the issue of separation of powers between executive, judiciary, and the legislative. So, as an architect of the Constitution, Dr. Ambedkar's views on that, the kind of template which he gave, and where do we stand today in terms of changes which we would have envisioned or we would want to make, or perhaps the way we want to carry on that?
Vishal, that question becomes very, very important in today's perspective, where many a time it happens, the judiciary is not only interpreting the law, but it is making the law, saying that there is a vacuum because the parliament has not made a law, therefore we are issuing this kind of direction. Take the latest example regarding appointment of election commission, where the Supreme Court has given certain directions. Similarly, legislature also, where it is supposed to make law, because if the laws are not made, probably judiciary enters into that. So far as the constitutional scheme of the three organs of the government is concerned, I think very clearly defined. Lawmaking is with the legislature. Interpretation of the law is with the judiciary. Implementation of the law is with the executive. It is only when one organ of the government starts working in the jurisdiction of the other organ of the government, the problem arises. So I think if all of them are working within their own domain, that kind of problem will not arise. I think this has started happening very recently. Like take for example, we always talk about the National Judicial Appointment Commission, which is again a burning issue because Supreme Court took the power to itself. Why that kind of interpretation was given? Because at that time, the executive started misusing the power by appointing people who were belonging to their own ideology. Therefore, because Constitution is a living document, it fell on the judiciary to interpret in a way that the judicial independence of judiciary is maintained. But what happened? Thereafter, the same thing happened with the collegium system also. Since the same thing has happened with the collegium system also, now again there is a time when there is a need for a change, and probably Parliament exercising its power should come out with a legislation where the original position is restored, ensuring that independence of judiciary is maintained. So if all the three arms of the government are working within their own domain, I think the Constitution will very well serve our purpose.
The original vision of Dr. Ambedkar there. I'd like to bring in Advocate Deshathan Nigam also on this aspect. Advocate Nigam, Dr. Ambedkar's views on the separation of powers in the Constitution with three organs of the government, the aspects which he made very clear and the way those aspects have been so far looked at and implemented.
Well, in fact, Vishalji, one of the important criticism of the Constituent Assembly is that they ignored the duties of citizens. And if the duties of citizens were included in the Constitution at that point of time, then all the three organs and the citizens manning them would have understood their duties properly and would have acted accordingly rather than abrogating each other's functions, the way Mr. P.K. Malhotra, informed you about the collegium system, the working of the collegium system. The independence of judiciary in our Constitution is maintained by making their removal very difficult through the process of Parliament. And therefore, the independence is always maintained like that. And the accountability, when the executive was appointing the judiciary, the accountability lied with the people, because when an executive, the government of the day, goes back to the people for re-election, they have to give an account what good or bad things they do, and people can penalize them through the process of election. Now, therefore, the separation of power is sacrosanct, and all the three organs of the state have to function within their own domain rather than encroaching upon each other. Nobody is supreme. There is a system of check and balances, and that system of check and balances has to be there. Now, let me add also further certain aspects that people probably misconstrue about Ambedkar ji, that he was against Hindu religion. No, he was not. He was against the Hindu society existing at that point of time, which believed in touchability, untouchability, and casteism. That's the difference that one has to remember. Second is that he never wanted the appeasement. He very clearly said, being a minority should not be a privilege, and being a majority should not be a penalty. And hence, all should have equal rights, and there should not be any appeasement. About Pakistan, he made a very interesting comment that Muslims will see the futility of creation of nonsensical entity called Pakistan based on religion and will come back to Indian fold. When you see what is going on today and the social media, the kind of voices that you hear from Pakistan, you start remembering Ambedkar ji. So therefore, the entire personality of Ambedkar ji has to be looked into totality. Yes, there were certain shortcomings. Nobody is perfect. He was quite silent about Adivasi's proportionate representation, at that point of time when he actually talked about Dalits and their proportionate representation. So there are issues, but at the same time, you have to look at the larger vision he gave to this country and also the international principles that he enunciated and propounded. And please imagine that the United States of America, which is considered to be the so-called oldest democracy, gave rights to women to vote in 1964, whereas our constitution immediately gave this very same rights to women when India became independent. So that is the vision that we have, the gender equality that we have, the women's rights that we have, the economic principles that we have, the social reforms that we have today. Nobody can, question them. In fact, the successive governments have taken that forward. And even today, it has been taking forward. Yes, I believe he got Bharat Ratna in 1990, which he should have gone much, much earlier. Looking at his contribution, his undermining is a question that we keep on discussing quite often. But जिसको कहते हैं देर आए दुरुस्त आए, he got Bharat Ratna. His principles are being recognized, and the principle of equality is being implemented through various schemes of delivery that this present government has brought in, which are non-discriminatory. In fact, 35 to 40% of the benefits of those schemes are going to Muslims.
Okay.
So those are the principles of equality which we see. Therefore, those who implement the constitution are more important than the constitution itself.
Okay. Well, fairly summed up there by Advocate Deshrutan Nigam, and I'll take the thread because we have to wrap up this discussion as well. But before we do so, I'd like to understand from all three of you, in your understanding, for the larger, general public to understand, for the citizens of India to understand it much better, the way what we learn from Dr. B.R. Ambedkar's life and journey, the principles which were put forwarded by him, and the way we can move ahead, perhaps for the 100, 200, 300 odd years on some of those principles, which might not change for all these years. Professor Yadav, let's begin with you.
Thank you. I think the first thing that I would like to remember Dr. Ambedkar for is education. I think a modern, rational man is created out of education, the right kind of education. So we should spread education, and educated people must be rational and must be having scientific temper and must be able to understand any issue in its totality like he tried to understand. We must also remember him for the kind of democracy that he gave. Political democracy, one man, one vote, one value. I think one man, one vote we of course reached. And in political terms, it's one value. But in socio-economic terms, I think the value is yet to be created that way. But we are moving in that direction. I would also like to remember him as a great nationalist, what Mr. Kohl remembered, but Mr. Malhotra also reminded us, and Deshratanji also reminded us, a man who could think about nation first, who could think about the nation being strong, who could really go against appeasement even at that time, and who could even open his mind before everyone, even though he may not have been liked by all, but he could say Article 370 was wrong because giving all rights to one entity and having giving no liabilities doesn't make any good sense of politics. And I would also say he wanted, in democracy there should be no hero worship. He wanted political morality to be taking a center stage in a democracy, and he also wanted to believe in future generations because he kept this constitution as a flexible document in most of the ways, because he said we cannot ever think that the future generations will not have a better mind to think about this constitution, about this nation. We must remember that optimism of his and that faith of his also.
Okay. Mr. Malhotra, from your perspective.
I bow my head to him for the courage and conviction with which he carried out his ideas, educating the people, giving a clear message, and putting upfront his view without fear or without favor, telling that what exactly is good for the nation. I think that kind of courage, and that also came in the adverse circumstances in which he has grown. When he was going to the school, he was not allowed to take water from the tap. He was not allowed to sit in the class. The kind of life which he has seen at that time, in spite of that, he could achieve best in the education, and based on the education which he got outside and within the country, he could serve the nation and give us such a wonderful constitution which is working so well. It is flexible in the sense that whenever the need of the society arises to achieve the objectives given in the preamble of the constitution, you can give that kind of interpretation, liberal interpretation, to achieve the objective. And ultimately, again, I will give the off-quoted speech or one sentence which he uttered with regard to implementation of the constitution. I think I said it in the beginning also, and I will close my remarks with that. What he said was, however good a constitution may be, it is sure to turn out bad because those who are called to work it happen to be bad lot. However bad a constitution may be, it may turn out to be good if those who are called to work it happen to be a good lot. So meaning thereby implementation, as all other panelists have said, in case you are implementing this constitution in the spirit in which the constitution framers have made it, probably we can achieve the social and economic equality for which Dr. B.R. Ambedkar was looking for.
Okay. Mr. Kaul, final concluding comments from you.
I think he left conscious an open document because he believed that whatever he is doing, it is going to come to a good turn, and people will, if they change it, they'll change for better. That is what he thought. No person in his time got got his entire idea implemented. He also didn't. But 80% of what he wanted to say to people to reform society, it was implemented. People accepted it at that time also. Now what we can do is that we can see him as a reformist, not as a rebel, because he, despite all the trials and troubles through his entire life, he did not speak against anybody. He only said for a change. Okay.
But remained steadfast on his goal, to his convictions, to his ideals.
His conviction, and that was his conviction, not to speak against, but to tell people how to change, how to reform. What we can do is that we can remember him as a reformist and read his work, not read articles and interpretations of his work. That would be the best service to him, and then we'll understand him, then probably we'll be able to take it forward in a better way.
Okay. That's the best way to sum it up, as Mr. Kaul is saying, that read his work, not the interpretation of his works, perhaps. And there's too much to read. Yes.
We are missing one part. He was a champion of women's rights.
Well, yes, we indeed spoke about that.
Very revolutionary. In the end, I would like to remember him for being a champion of women's rights, because what he told women was, educate, be healthy, take care of your health, take care of your family's health and your child's education and health, and never get into this showism of jewels or jewelry around, because education is the best jewel that you have.
Again, education is the key word there. Advocate Nigam, final comment from you before we wrap it up.
Yes, Vishalji, let me point out that Mr. Ambedkar was the one person who made a painting of Buddha with open eyes, which is a clear message for the citizens of this country to be always vigilant, keep an eye on the constitution and the way it's being implemented and how our politicians working. And one of the important aspects is that he believed that the history should be told as it happened, not glossed over. So these are two very important lessons which I wanted to add.
Okay, there it is. Thank you so much, Advocate Deshratan Nigam, Mr. Parijat Kaul, Mr. P.K. Malhotra and Professor Sushma Yadav as well for sharing your valuable inputs and insight on the journey of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, his contributions, his convictions, his ideals, his principles as well, the work done by him to chart out the road ahead for the country, our country, India, after independence, and of course, profound impact on the lives of its citizens as well. We'll keep a close watch on all these developments and come back again with a different topic. Till then, keep watching Sunset Television. Thank you.